All right, so we are recording. We have our panelists here today, and we've got some people popping in as we start. And Julie, shall we begin?
Yeah, let's go ahead. So welcome to Nerdy Shop Talk, where we talk about things we're interested in and then make that available to other people who might also be interested. This episode is episode 5, and it's basically virtual, which is our new normal-ish. Stacey, if you want to pick up the intro.
Yeah, so I'm just going to point out Julie's frozen at the moment on my screen. She might not be on yours. She is joining us from sunny Florida, where she has a little bit of an unstable connection today. So we hope that everything works out for her throughout this session. What we want to talk about today, so I'm going to Julie Dirksen is an instructional designer. She's the author of Design for How People Learn. She's one of the best-selling instructional design books available, or it is one of the best-selling books. She is a respected international speaker and instructor and has been recognized as a guild master by the e-learning guild. I myself am Tracy Parrish. I work at South Lake Regional Health Center in Newmarket, Ontario. And I'm just kind of a Jill of all trades. I do a lot of different things: instructional designer, LMS administrator, graphic, when I have to do the graphics, all of those things. I'm part of the Articulate Hero community, moderator of Learn Chat, and a bunch of other things. And I'll let Julie introduce our guests today.
Yeah, so this topic came about because one of the most common questions I get these days is, so how is that whole big jump to virtual going? And while it's undoubtedly impacted me, there's people who are way smarter about this than I am. And so two of the people who are, as far as I'm concerned, some of the smartest people around on virtual learning are Karen Heider, who's also a guild master, and she's also been involved in virtual learning basically as long as we've had it, I think, and Jennifer Hofmann, who likewise, and who runs InSync Training, which has been, I think, had a very, very busy year. So we'll start with Jennifer, but tell us about your busy year. What's been going on?
Well, it has been a busy year. So back last January, maybe a year ago now, we were thinking, this is going to be a slower, maybe we're not going to have a lot of growth this year. It just didn't feel like there was a lot of energy. But then we hit March. And I remember in March, stuff just started coming in from existing clients, from people who had never been virtual before. We're getting urgent calls from China. Can we put a whole conference online next week, by the way, in Chinese? And we were just doing the best we could. And there was a lot of sloppiness going on, but it got very, very busy. And some of the examples are in 2019, can't say last year anymore, but in 2019, maybe 5% of our production hours and our virtual training hours were in Zoom. And now it's like 60% or 65% in Zoom. We used to have, the average session length was 2 hours. And in 2019, we only had 6 days that were over 6 hours. And in 2020, we had 1,800 days that were over 6 hours. Wow. And people are starting to say, okay, this is what we expect. We got really, really busy. At first, it was just, let's get content online as fast as we can. But by the end of the year, people were saying, maybe we need to teach our own people how to do this well.
Mm-hmm. That's an amazing segue for why this topic even came up for me, Jennifer, because I had seen the piece that Jane Bozarth had written on the InSync training blog. So I'm going to just put that in the chat, and our participants are also welcome to chat to us in the chat. If you have questions that you want, we'll put them in there so our guests can see them. But the piece that Jane wrote was the new normal-ish, basically. And as you said, it was like the first phase in March was, let's just take whatever training we have and just put it online and just make sure that we keep things going. We have to keep the training going. Everything was there, thinking that it was going to be temporary. And then she suggested that we went into phase 2, where it was, okay, it's not so temporary, but we have all these scheduled trainings. So let's make sure that we keep up with all that scheduled training, whether it was 1 hour or 5 days or whatever it was. And then as you were saying, Jennifer, you went from like 116 hours or whatever, a very small number of 7-hour classes into an astronomical number of 7-hour classes online. And now we're in this phase here where we're stuck doing this online learning with just no change into, well, not stuck with it, but I mean, we're still doing it in that same manner where we haven't really thought about the learners, what they think, what they're experiencing. Have we even trained the trainers that are using it, using the tools? I know some managers have been using, we were talking about Teams earlier off before we started, and I've seen managers using Teams for months now. And then just this week when I said, well, just share your screen, they're like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, well, you've been on it for almost a year. How do you still not know that part? So yeah.
How about you, Karen? How's your last 12 months been?
Well, like Jennifer, I started getting loads of phone calls in March, and people were kind of desperate at that point just for any direction, any guidance, any checklists, any recommendations on software tools or hardware tools. And everyone seemed to be scrambling just to get online, whatever that meant. And they weren't totally sure what that meant. But I think what ended up happening there is the bad designs we were operating from were just, they lit up, right? It became so obvious that our instructional design for the physical classroom were really not that great there either, because the things that we then, just sort of stuck into a PowerPoint, into a sharing screen and, doing the old chalk and talk kind of thing, it was bad. It was as bad as it would have been in a physical classroom, but we felt like we had no control over it. Because at least in a physical classroom, we know that they heard us. Online, we can't even say that. We don't know what they were doing. We don't know anything. And how unnerving that was for the trainers to try to, deliver a message that way, and how worried the managers were at that stage that no one was going to learn anything. This was going to be a huge waste of time.
But Karen, don't you think there was, but nobody's doing anything anyway, so we might as well put them in training?
I didn't hear that one, actually. I didn't hear that they weren't doing anything anyway. I heard that they were still trying to, get people to figure out how to live in this new normal-ish. How are you going to do your timesheet? How are you going to do your team meetings? How are you going to do your onboarding or whatever might be going on there? And everybody was pretty scared. But it was interesting how quickly people adopted it, including folks like my 90-year-old mother, who says the Hail Mary with her best friend at 7 o'clock every day, and she is fine with Zoom. So the things that we had to explain in great depth to people 2 years ago, like what our jobs were, now we just say, we run a Zoom event, everybody knows what that is. And to me, that was an incredible first step for mankind. I mean, we achieved so much in that period of time. And I was excited to see it because years ago I was involved in putting together a certification, and it was a hard sell. People didn't think that trainers would move online or would want to move online, or that learners would ever accept learning online. And we were saying, of course they're going to do this. Of course it's here to stay. It's like saying email is not going to be used because people are annoyed by it. It's like, but it's become the lifeblood of our businesses.
Yep.
So I'm so thrilled. I'm thrilled to see how many people have needed to take this seriously, design for it, get the right infrastructure in place, get the right team members in place. And when I hear other people talk about preparing and hiring producers, it makes me jump for joy.
Agreed.
Do you find that, are you hearing that as a norm that people are starting to hire producers?
Absolutely. Yeah. If not hire, just skill up. Just get somebody on your team who's going to wear that hat and who's going to play that role for the trainer, because the poor trainer, we know very well, cannot deliver a clear message and troubleshoot your network connectivity from here.
I think I think just understanding that that's a job role. I mean, that's part of, that's a function that needs to exist is the producer role in addition to whoever's presenting or facilitating or whatever it is.
A lot of organizations are hiring them in-house in addition to supplementing them with external staff, just like they are doing with facilitators. And they're either going out and hiring Karen's team or my team as a supplement to their own, because they don't want their people having to work at 2 o'clock in the morning if they've got a global, there's a lot of really good reasons to hire out, but I think it's really important that they have that skill inside, because then they really know what goes into it. We actually, we've worked with ATD for years and years, and we've worked with supporting their facilitators, and now they're coming over and they're having to learn the technology on their own for various reasons. And they said, I didn't realize how much I was depending on the producers, even though I've been teaching online for 10 years. And they're excellent trainers. They're super professional. They know their content. They're great online, but they never learned to say load their own slide deck, for example. And this is general, not everyone. I mean, and they're great at what they do, but they didn't realize what it was they weren't doing.
Right.
So I think it's important that organizations understand that.
I remember the first time I taught a class online at ATD, and I think it was an in-sync person who was my producer, and it was just so great to have that person who could help with that stuff, because I'd been done like webinars and things where I'd had to like kind of play both roles, and to have somebody who was just kind of taking care of that was amazing. So
producers there to make you look good, Julie.
That's it. Yeah. It's so much less scary when you think that you can at least just try to stay focused on the connection that you're having with these live students. If you can't have a connection with the live students, my question is, why are you bothering to do it? So putting all the technology aside and allowing that connection to happen authentically as we can in this format is really crucial to the success of our learning and our remembering what we learned.
Yeah. Well, that actually segues well into our next question, which is, I was having a conversation with somebody about virtual conferences, and they were talking about how the expo function wasn't working very well for them. They were a vendor. They had bought a booth, virtual booth in one of these expos. And I was talking about how, like, when I'm in a physical expo, usually I do the like loop around where I don't make eye contact and I keep my name tag flipped over and I'm like totally walking down the dead center of the aisle just to like scan through things. And then if I'm interested in something, I might sidle up while a salesperson is like talking to somebody else and just kind of peruse the literature. And then if I'm really, really interested, I'll actually, totally swag shopping here. If I'm really, really interested, I'll actually talk to a salesperson. And that one of the problems in this virtual environment is it skipped you straight to step 3. Like all of a sudden you're immediately face to face with a salesperson. And I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that, that thing right away. I might work up to that. And so it feels to me like, especially with the virtual conference stuff, that there's all of these, whether they're social niceties or whether they're kind of different ways of interacting, or whether it's like some of the nonverbals or any of those kinds of things that are missing in that environment. What do you tell people about trying to, like, that's obviously a conference example, it's not a virtual learning example per se, but I'm sure that there's kind of equivalent stuff in your world.
It's
so,
a
like, what's
people
your
example,
best,
right? It's how people are connecting. And the first thing I tell you is, just even when you're training, don't try to replicate the experience that you had already.
Right.
This is, even though we've got PowerPoint, we've got people, and we've got a trainer, virtual training is a different environment than face-to-face training. Just like watching a concert online is different than face-to-face, even if you have the same musicians and the same band, there's a reason that we pay money to go to a concert face-to-face. They both could be good experiences, but they're not the same experience. So instead of trying to, I haven't seen those virtual things done, the virtual expos done really well, even with all the different tech, unless it's really expensive. I'm told it can be done well. I still haven't seen it. But I think that come up with something different. Maybe there's everybody, all the vendors, we all create a 2-minute video, and there's some kind of contest. We used to walk around expos and get stamps for every time we'd visit a booth in order to get a prize. Maybe there's a contest. Visit as many videos as you can to get your Amazon gift card or some kind of different incentive. But we have to not try to replicate the experience, but find an experience that people can engage in and be motivated on their own.
Mhm.
And I think it's
That's
okay to
great.
recognize not everybody is there to shop for a product. So the vendor might tell me every wonderful thing about their gadgetry, but I don't care. I'm not buying.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
for me to be able to pick and choose and meet with those people, and what do we do at guild events? We put the ice cream sandwiches in there. I mean, you got to have some kind of motivation. Gaming, giveaways, sign up fors, win a free trial of. I mean, those things, the swag can come in a new format. And
Mhm.
I remember when we first moved online years ago, and clients of mine were trying to replicate the fun of coming to the home city office, and they'd go to a ball game and they'd have the local chowder and all that kind of stuff. And then they moved online and everybody was brokenhearted. They're like, but my buddies and the chowder and the game. So they put together a care package and they sent them freeze-dried chowder, freeze-dried chowder, and just tried to say, we know it's not the same, but we still love you. And there's candy in there. And try to just cope with the fact that this is different, but still good. So don't be mad at us. And I think we can do different but good here. We are doing different but good.
But don't
Mhm.
apologize for the experience you are creating either.
That's a good
I'm
point.
sorry that we're not face to face, because that lets
Yeah.
them say, well, yeah, this is less than. This
Hmm.
is a different experience, and let's experience it differently.
And don't charge less either. You're ruining it for everybody else. It's the
Yes.
same content, the same, if not more work. The only thing we're saving money on is, hotel rooms and food and stuff. But the rest of it is equally expensive to put together good
Yes.
training.
And that being said, like some of those costs that you're saying that you think are now maybe omitted because you're not giving the food, you're now paying for a producer, or you're now paying for this, or you're now paying for digital swag. So it's still, yeah, that's a really good point. I like that, Karen.
What are you paying for? Are you paying for a room, or are you paying for content?
Yeah. Mhm. I agree.
And if you don't have a producer, what's the risk? What does that risk cost you in goodwill?
Mhm.
I just took over doing a project for some friends locally, and the person who had been doing the production hated it because she hated being in the limelight. She hated that responsibility. As far as I was concerned, she was perfectly capable of doing it, but she dreaded it so much. So in our handoff meeting, I'm like, listen, when things go wrong, I can't promise you things aren't going to go wrong, but when things go wrong, now you get to blame me. What is that worth?
Right.
Really, I mean, that's worth a lot to people to be able to say, I didn't do it. It wasn't my fault. Somebody and I can explain it in a way why it went wrong, and it wasn't the trainer's fault or the client's fault. It was Zoom's fault. No.
I
It's
always
Zoom's
blame
fault.
the
Blame Zoom.
internet.
Yeah.
I always blame the internet.
Sure.
No matter what happened, well, you know how the internet is. Everybody's like, oh yeah, the internet.
Oh yeah, we roll our eyes.
Yeah.
But I'm straddling Adobe Connect 11 now with people still on Mac versions of it, which is the old version. Still, some people on browsers, some people on their phones.
Mhm.
It's a nightmare. So until things get stabilized, I can fully expect that I'm going to tear my hair out every time I have to do this.
Mhm.
But my participants are patient, my facilitators are patient. I take the hit when things go wrong, and I always have a plan B and plan C and plan D in place for
Mhm.
when plan A goes wrong.
Would that be your best advice for those of us are now being told, okay, this face-to-face experience no longer can be face-to-face, and that might be because of COVID, that might be because of new lockdowns that are happening, where we just think this is about to change, and yes, we can get 10 people back in the room, and then nope, there's another lockdown that can't happen. So now we're faced with those people that different technologies, different platforms, different devices. Is that your best solutions, that you just make sure you have other plans, or can you plan for those ahead of the experience, or do you have to wait for the mistake to happen and then try to work through it?
Accountability is key here. So if I can prep people days and weeks in advance to have the right equipment, to invest in a headset. Hey, I'll buy you a headset. I'll mail you a headset. to get on the decent internet connection, to not be in the basement expecting to be getting the Wi-Fi from the Starbucks at the corner of your road. I mean, like, let's just reel in the ridiculousness of what you think is supposed to magically work here. And then make sure people are properly prepared and properly terrified that it's all going to go wrong. And then when they start to take it seriously, then we can count on that. But we also should assume everything will go wrong all the time and be ready for hosting the video on the intranet.
Right.
So that if we can't run the video live in Zoom, we have a place to send them or
Right.
put it on YouTube.
Or and sorry, I was just going to say, sorry, Jennifer, I'm cutting you off there, but even being excused as participants to know things are going to go wrong. Like, just know it's going to happen. It's not. You don't want to downplay, like you said, Jennifer, the experience, but things might happen. An internet might not work. A video might not play, and that's okay. And I was saying that to Julie earlier when I took off the virtual background and went, well, this is my background. And when we started this experience a year ago or 2 years ago, we would like, oh, if you didn't have the perfect setup behind you, the IKEA shelves and minimalist, everybody was like, oh, she didn't even clean up her background before she went on Zoom. And now it's like, where are you presenting? The bathroom? Fine, because it's quiet, perfect, whatever.
Right.
Whatever you have to do is excuse
Room
yourself.
closet.
Yeah.
Well, Tracy, I think that, we're still in COVID and we're still in lockdown, and I think that a lot of these classes that we have put online, there's going to bean counters, the people that are paying for it are going to say, you did it online already. Why do we have to go back face to face?
Yeah.
And there are some programs that should be face to face, no doubt. When we're teaching face to face sales and relationship building, or heart surgery, I still want my heart surgeon to have that final lesson with another heart surgeon next to them. I mean, Zoom is great, but come on. But if we're teaching leadership skills or we're teaching customer service skills, where most of these skills are performed virtually anyway, we're coaching people over the phone or over Zoom, then teaching those skills virtually makes more sense. It's more of an authentic design. And if June 1st, God willing, and pass the mustard, everybody's able to go back to work or do whatever they want to do, I think we're going to have 70 to 80% of the stuff that went virtual stay virtual. And when we get together, it'll be for guild events. We won't pretend that a sales conference is training anymore, because the value of the sales conference was getting people together face to face. And we'll have training on Thursday afternoon and nobody will show up but the trainer, but we can justify it that way. We'll make decisions, and it won't just be based on, well, if people are online, they're not learning or it's not as good, because I think that we've done a good job as an industry of proving that we can do a good job with this and help people learn.
That I'll use that to segue into our next question that we had too, was, so have you seen, like, what is the impact you have seen on learners? There is obviously some positive and some negative, but what are you seeing in that respect?
I want to say that because we do not need to cram a whole lot of training into a short period of time, because travel is what's governing our schedule, we've been able to do proper spaced learning. So the teams that I'm working with are developing and implementing blended learning with pre-learning that lives in a asynchronous platform that includes lots of video clips and articles to read and discussion boards. And then they have once a week or once every other week, depending on the program, a live online 90-minute session with a facilitator and 250 of their closest friends. Those sessions are very interactive. There's a lot of typing in chat, a lot of responding to polls. We're seeing video clips and reacting to those video clips and, dealing with nuanced information. And I am observing it as something that is working incredibly well. People are committed to it. It helps that they're earning CEUs to stay committed to it. They are fully engaged, constantly responding to questions and typing in chat and on the discussion boards in between sessions. They're completing all of their assignments, and they're coming away with some really good learning objectives met. So I'm feeling like this is really the best of both worlds. It's really what we were begging for 25 years ago, that we weren't doing hit and run training where people show up and you give them a whole bunch of stuff for whatever amount of time they could possibly tolerate, and then you send them away and you never see them again. You just thank you, next.
Mhm.
And here we're building relationship, and like 65% of our online content is learner developed. So they're very, very engaged, and they're showing up week after week. They're amazing. And my facilitators, they're acclimating to this very well. They were terrified to begin with, but they're doing so well with it. And they're becoming better and better designers every time I talk to them, because they're seeing new things like, oh, I could have done it this way. Yeah, you could have. Let's try that. So
Do you find that organizations buy into that model easily? Because there's a bigger time commitment for, there may or may not, but there might be the perceived idea that there's a bigger time commitment that my staff member has to go and put time into that type of a learning model rather than the hit and run, like you said.
They want it done in 2 days.
Right.
I mean, it's, if it takes 4 weeks, what if they don't finish? What if they don't show up? If we, and we're doing, I'm seeing tons and tons of all day sessions. And the better ones, even if they go all day, are, there's a break every 30 minutes. There's a lot of self-directed work. Even though you're logged on and you're there for 7 hours, maybe 30 minutes of it is me following around Jane Bozarth, writing down what she does with observations. Maybe if breakout rooms are developed well, they can, let me back up. When people are in a well-designed breakout activity, they always wish they had more time.
yeah.
And
That's true.
and then a lot of this time should be, don't skip the debriefs, don't skip the evaluations. If we're just talking for 6 hours, that wasn't good in the classroom, and it's worse online, especially if we're forcing people to be on video all day, which is a different issue altogether. But if we can make it about the learners and not about us, that's fine. If we've got a 40-minute lecture, and sometimes there is 40-minute lectures, why don't we just record that and let people pause, and there's activities? Do you remember the old videos in the classroom where it said pause video now, and then you would go and do an activity? There's no reason we can't do that. We're doing 5-day accounting classes all day, 10 hours, some of these classes. And these people, they have to come back. It's CEUs. But sometimes the producers have 2 hours where they're just monitoring to make sure people don't need help, so they can connect them to the facilitator, because people are doing work on their own. It's real work, it's desk work, and then they can go back and forth. So people have always been afraid if we stop talking, they will leave. But that's not the case. Give our learners something to do. People want to learn, they want to do a good job, I think, for the most part. So let's let them do that. And I think we're also teaching them how to work in this new world while we're teaching them how to learn in this new world.
Right.
Accountability is still part of this, right? We have to trust that they are professional or adult people who actually are interested in the outcomes from this learning, and that the learning is relevant, that they have a reason to be there. I'm not teaching you for the sake of teaching you to hear myself talk. And once we're all on board with that, magic things can happen.
So one of the big ones that I sort of see is this whole issue of managing distraction. Like that is one of the benefits of taking people out of their regular workplace and putting them in a different physical location, is that there's a certain amount of distraction that just gets eliminated by that. And obviously in virtual, we're not taking people out of their workplace. They're in the place where they're also working. And so what's your sort of wisdom on that?
A lot of breaks.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that people, let them know we're gonna have email breaks, we're gonna have bio breaks. I mean, we're gonna give you time to do the things that you're going to do anyway. So if you know, and we respect that, like, okay, I need to check my email, you need to check your email, we'll meet you all back here in 10 minutes. People they'll be able to relax. And just open communication and changing things up. That's for those. But if you have a 2-hour session, most people, I think, will stay focused. If to Karen's point, if they understand why they're there and it's worth their time, because there's always something else they could be doing.
And they're asking their kids to stay focused, so they ought to be able to do it. But I got to admit, I had to move out of the office I was working in because I've worked in that office by myself for 20 years and somebody got, sent home and he's been working at my desk next to me for these however many months it's been. I had to leave for the sake of my business and my marriage. I had to work out of a different room. And so here I have this lovely yellow room now. But
It's
if you
lovely.
have to go to the broom closet or you have to go to the guest room, bathroom, and lock yourself in to have privacy and focus, great. If you're in cubicle land and it's just noisy all around you, then what would you have done before? You probably put on a headset or something to just try to block out the noise.
Mhm.
And if we can, and this is easier for people working on laptops than desktops and things like that, but if we can physically just change our space when we're learning from other times,
Oh, that's a good point.
it's better. I mean, if I can pick, right now I'm participating in this not at my desk. I picked up my laptop and I moved it. But if I was at my desk, I've got my notebooks and I've got my to-do list and I've got, my desk phone ringing up. If we can just change the space to make a dedicated learning space,
Mhm.
and that's a nice to have. I understand that not everybody can do that, but I think that helps as well.
I also like to send things out ahead of time and remind people to shut down their distracting things, their inboxes, and mute your ringers and those types of things. And I literally cover ground rules and ask people to agree to participate every time. And what happens when they agree to participate is sometimes they say, no, I won't agree. And for me, that lets me off the hook because I can't make you learn. I can try, I could inject you with something, I could send you a pill, but I can't make you learn. You have to at least give me 50% of it, if not 99% of it. So if you can't do that because you're waiting for a call from your boss or your kid is sick, I get it. I get it. That's your choice. But I can't change that. So I like to get people prepared days and weeks ahead of time and make sure they know what I'm asking them. And I'm competing with every other webinar they've been on, which didn't require them to pay attention, that allowed them to go ahead and multitask, and they were never asked to do anything. So I'm going to ask them to do things regularly, over and over and over again. I'm going to ask them to type and respond to polls and whatever it is. If they're distracted, they're not going to get as much out of it. And I say that right up front. If you choose not to, your choice. But here's what I'm doing.
I like it. Has there been anything that you ladies have seen that has really surprised you and worked better than you thought it was going to work, or you've seen somebody else do that was just really successful?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, the fact that this rush into these sessions that were not designed for online initially and get it done in a week, the fact that they were successful at all was initially surprising to me. And the fact that learners put up with it was initially surprising to me. There's a couple of things that I realized is that it is unusual time and everybody put up with a lot of stuff. And so people were a lot more tolerant when things weren't as easy. And they were appreciative that they had opportunities when, I hate to say it, when a lot of other people didn't have opportunities. So learners put up with a lot because I think there was an intrinsic motivation that had nothing to do with us or the workplace. But the people that put their content online very, very quickly, that they were more successful, even if they put their facilitators through just 3 hours of orientation training. Just this is how to work with your producer. This is how to just engage and ask questions and make sure people are listening. When they were able to set the facilitators up for success, I think the whole program was set up for success. And sometimes that was a very intensive training program, and sometimes it was just an orientation. We did a lot of one-on-one coaching this year, especially for small nonprofits. We worked with a suicide prevention conference, and what we did is worked with all of the behavioral psychologists who usually work one-on-one. This is a very, very face-to-face interactive field, and just coach them on how they can interact And the feedback was that really helped them. Just not just giving them a producer, but preparing them ahead of time. And how open they were to that feedback was just amazing to me. That worked very, very well.
I love that. Thank you so much for doing that, Jennifer. I really appreciate that you did that work specifically. You know, I think I was really
Interesting things this year.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how well our groups worked with multilingual participants and a captioner. So we use a live captioner, and that not only helps the people who are in our community who are deaf or hard of hearing, of which that is the primary community I work with, but the people who English was not their first or second or third language at least had some hope of being able to catch up with what they missed or go back and read the transcript. We post the transcript after the session with the recording, with all the chat text, so that people really can use the resources later to review what they learned. And while they can't earn CEUs if they skipped the live session, they can still go back and learn stuff that they missed from the live session. And we would have never been able to do that face to face. Remember what a hassle it was to get a camera on a tripod in the back of the room and the stupid tapes. I never want to go back to that again.
It's funny you mentioned that closed captioning, because I had one video that was produced in our organization. I'm in the healthcare, and they were doing this demonstration of now what they had to do when they're in full PPE. So they recorded it and they had it all going, and you could just kind of hear the voices muffled behind the masks and the face shields. So I was trying to now figure out who was saying what, based on just the sound of the voice, and trying to match the sound of the voice with the role I thought was doing it. So it was a lot of work going back with them to go, okay, you've got to give me a script of what you're saying so I know what to close caption this video afterwards. And I think we're forgetting some of these new norms or just the new reality.
But that brought a lot, what I hate to say good stuff came out of this, because this was a horrible, horrible thing. But one of the things I have been seeing is much more attention to accessibility for hearing impaired or sight impaired or English as a second language in the United States, things like that. Whereas before, I think, well, if it didn't work for them this way, we just send them to a classroom or we'd send them to a coach. I'm not just saying I don't mean to say people weren't giving it attention, but we didn't worry about it as much virtually. I don't think, because this wasn't where the real training happened, maybe, I don't know. But the technologies are starting to work. Even PowerPoint is providing more and more closed captioning and things like that. The software platforms are coming out with options. I'm not sure that they're easy to use or easy to learn yet, but I think that there's more attention being paid to that. And the biggest training that I've seen for all of our clients is diversity and inclusion training is really, really rising. I don't know if it's having an impact, I'm not on that end of it, but people seem to be really thoughtfully trying to pay attention to underserved populations, whether it be hearing impaired, sight impaired, English as a second language, race, religion, whatever the concern is. I feel like people are trying to pay more attention to it. We have a more global audience. We've got I don't know, it just seemed to be a year where that type of stuff came out as a positive.
I'm with you, Jennifer. I saw a lot of positives. And, back in the day when you and I were getting started and people thought it was crazy that we were doing like birthday parties on
Right.
webinar tools and baby showers and stuff like that. But now people get why you would go to all the trouble to do that, because you want your great grandmother to be able to join and she can't,
Right.
So the ability to stay connected, I think, was a real lifeline for a lot of people. And I think you're right that people were willing to do it because they knew that it was going to pay off. It was going to be beneficial. And I think we need to keep that going, to point out to people, this isn't a poor version of real training. This is really, really good training. And maybe we have to work out a couple kinks here and there with technology or skilling people up, but this is really, really good training. And this is a very smart way to do it because it can be just in time or wherever you are, and I think that's a wonderful thing that came out of it.
You see anecdotes about my mother's church. There are people that hadn't been to church in years, and now they can attend church, and that's important to them. They're back in their community because somebody helped them set up a piece of technology that they had already.
Yeah.
And that's an anecdote, but I think the same could be said for our communities. How many people were working remotely in a town that there was no classroom, so there was no budget for them to travel, so they
Yeah.
didn't get the training, they got the memo, or they got a recording, or they got something second best. Now they're part of that. So I think this is a very inclusive way to train. And we've always known that, right, Karen? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a way we can get people together and nobody's left behind. I think everybody's realizing that now. And face-to-face isn't always the best because it's not as inclusive.
It's an equalizer on so many levels because I don't know what your rank is, or I don't know how old you are. I don't know what part of the country you're from, or I don't know what you're wearing. You know, like I don't have those weird elements that came into training and impacted people who wouldn't come to our training center because they were, you know, too shy to be in a public place. Okay, well, that's not an issue here. So I hold to this is an excellent way to deliver training if we do it well and if we are authentic with it and we continue to keep the learner at the center of it and we properly prepare our facilitators to operate in this environment. And I think it's here to stay. I hope so, because I continue. Yeah. I'm not going back. I'm not going back.
So we had some questions from audience questions in the chat. Do we want to do those, Tracy?
Sure. We do have a question about, you know, some of the proven techniques you've had to engage your audience virtually. And I think you've mentioned a few of them, but maybe you can touch on a few points.
I'll just give my global one. Jennifer knows this one all too well. Add more questions. Ask lots and lots of relevant questions. I'm not talking about silly questions. We don't care what your favorite ice cream flavor is, even if it is an icebreaker. But relevant questions, and expect people to answer them. Tell them how to answer. Type in chat, change your status to agree or disagree, respond to the poll, unmute your mic and speak up, raise your hand and ask permission to speak up. If we incorporate more questions that are relevant and that people can respond to, then we create feedback loops. And those feedback loops can change everything. What our trainers tell us they miss most is we have no idea what's happening on the other end. We get nothing. We talk to an empty room, a quiet void, we get nothing. But when people are actively responding in chat and responding to polls and changing their status, the dynamic changes completely. So if you do nothing else, add lots of questions to your presentation and don't, I mean, you could say every 3 to 5 minutes or something like that, but I'm going to say where it's relevant, where you would naturally say, hey, you guys, how many of you have ever, make it a poll, or what's your experience with, type it in chat.
And then click a green check mark when you're done. And when everybody is done, then we'll move on. Everybody's like, oh, she'll pay attention. And I might say, well, Julie, just to remind you, this is how you send a chat. Oh, she's actually paying attention to me. We've got to make people realize that we see them. It's not the same way we see them face to face. But in order to remind them of that, we actually have to pay attention. That's why if you're using a producer, if Karen is your producer, use her more than just to make sure the phones work. She's there to help enhance the experience, to not just be the facilitator assistant, but the learner advocate to make sure learning is happening. So if Chris hasn't answered in a couple of minutes or hasn't answered the last 3 polls, Karen might, Karen or whoever might write to them in the background. Are you having trouble? Are you there? Is there anything I can help you with? You know, we need people to know that they are seen. So we still need to avoid 80 people in a class that's meant to be interactive with active learning outcomes. Not saying it can't happen. People do very creative things, but if you wouldn't teach 80 people in a face-to-face classroom this content, don't teach 80 people online just because you have that many licenses in Zoom.
Yeah, there's something there too about participants being as engaged as they would be in any other space too. There was some, I don't remember where the footage came from, but it was kind of in the middle of young kids going back to school and having to do stuff or going online and learning that way. And they were showing these videos of all these teachers that are just, all they're looking at is the little white name in the black box, and their faces are just, they've got no emotion, they're drained, they've got no energy. And then as soon as somebody would turn on their screen, they're, the instructor's right back in it and engaged. And I think as adult learners, we need to remember that, that trainers, they're trying to help us too. And we need to be just as engaged as a learner as they are as a facilitator.
But we have to help the facilitators. I mean, it's a hard job. It's really draining to teach online. We're not getting the energy from the room, and people don't know if they're being successful, especially if they're newer. So the designs need to be really supportive. In other words, we can't leave it up to the facilitators to figure out how to engage everybody. They need to know how to use the technology. Even if they've got a producer, some technology training will help enable them to be successful, and maybe to think ahead, well, this isn't working. Can we try a whiteboard? I think a whiteboard might work, even though it's outside of the design. And some shadowing and some confidence and some coaching is important. We used to have week-long train the trainer programs for face-to-face. Online, I think we need to give maybe not 40 hours, but some comparable coaching and hand-holding to make people know that they can be successful, and if something falls down, they can recover. It's not over.
Jennifer, what you just said there, the word hand-holding, though, I think is the key here, because being trained is one thing, and knowing intellectually what needs to happen is one thing, and being there in the moment and have the butterflies in your stomach and your mousing hand is sweating so much that you can't control the ball. And it's like, it's harder than you think it's going to be. And so when the trainer gets there, I think it's so comforting for them to know the producer is standing by. I'll say, I have my mouse finger hovering. I'm ready to click. All you need to do is speak directly to me. Hey, Karen, can you play that video? Or hey, Karen, can you fix Mary's problem? And them knowing that there's somebody standing by allows them to relax into the part of this that they really know, which is how to deliver the message and how to respond to the learner's questions and things like that. So if we can just make way for them to do that, it makes their lives so much easier. And when they think they don't need it, you got to do a Jerry Maguire there, like, help me help you, brother. You're not going to be able to, we're not going to just wing this without talking about it ahead of time. We're not going to read each other's minds. You're not going to come up with amazing, clear questions in the moment. We need to do it ahead of time.
I'll pull out this comment we have from Christy, is that she sees she sees a client using apps like this one to play icebreaker games or those kind of games. So this one's backyard.co, which actually does look kind of neat, but it's her comment is that this seems like a time-consuming distraction if learning is really a serious business. So what kind of ways have you seen to really get people working into groups rather than just simple little breakout rooms, or something that looks maybe like this might just look like a fun little cliche kind of thing?
Well, if you're in a multiple session or a long class, if the breakouts build on one another, that makes participation that much more critical. So it's potentially the same group working on an exercise. We practice, we go back, we learn something else from the facilitator, and then we go back and practice again, and we keep building, maybe on a common Word document or a common Google document. That type of activity helps people stay engaged throughout. It's not a simple breakout where we're just putting stuff on a whiteboard, though there is value there too. I don't mean to take away from that, but it's something that builds and can get us into deeper learning. And maybe an icebreaker at the beginning and key takeaway at the end. Those can be fun if they're quick and the technology isn't hard. But there are ways to use these tools as idea boards, and I think sometimes you need them because some of the software we have out there just does not give us the whiteboards and does not give us the polling yet, but every day it changes. And that's the biggest challenge for me is I log on, I don't know what the software is going to do that day.
Yeah.
Zoom's got emoticons, Zoom doesn't have emoticons. We've got breakout rooms in MS Teams, but they're not really working yet, or only if you have the update and only if you're on the browser. And that, even for the best producer, that can be very, very frustrating. So if you've got tools that are external that you know work every time until it stabilizes for polling and whiteboarding, it might not be a bad thing if you're using tools like Google Meet, Blue Jeans, MS Teams, things like that.
I agree.
I did a.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I did a workshop a couple of months ago, and it was a workshop I've done live, and it was about user experience. A part of it was prototyping, and so I had each of the teams, when I teach this, they prototype a mobile app, and so and Kevin Thorne gave me the idea years ago that it would be prototyping a performance support app for the zombie apocalypse, just so we didn't have to worry about subject matter so much. And I did it in Google Slides, where each group had a section of slides, and if they needed more, they just add some next slides in. But they just collaborated, and I have to say it worked out way better than I thought it was going to, because I was able to actually like watch all of them build stuff in their breakout groups. We just had a group of slides, but everybody was in the same doc, so everybody could see what everybody else was doing. And usually I'd like troll around the outside of the room and kind of look over people's shoulders, and this was as good, if not better, than when I was doing that. So that was one that I was honestly kind of shocked at how well it worked. So anyway.
I love that. I love that it was as good, if not better, because I think that we need to really convince people sometimes that it's going to be as good or better. But the tools like that allow you to collaborate and be outside the session room make a lot of sense, because you can continue to collaborate and access those materials even later. So it can go on and on for days or weeks if you needed to. But again, I think learners are interested in learning. So when you send them out to a breakout group to have them discuss their favorite, Seinfeld character or something like that, they don't know what the point is. So they become so discouraged by that. But if you send them out to, Jennifer, I'm sure you've got something in your accounting course, like where they have to actually argue points, like the law around a certain tax code or something like that, where they're intellectually challenged. And then the media that they're using is sort of not that important. It matters how their brains are being engaged.
Right.
So I would say don't do breakout groups for the sake of breakout groups, like, oh, we got to mix it up, we got to make them do something now. If you want to make them do something, have them stand up and do jumping jacks. But if you want them to be engaged in relevant activities where there's going to be some debate, where they're going to have to question and argue and convince each other, maybe it's a great time to spend energy on doing a breakout activity. But there's plenty of things you can just do in chat. You can certainly send people out to paired phone calls if you wanted to. You could say, hey, just dial up your coworker and discuss this particular point and come back with 3 tips for your colleagues or something. You can always set up something, and the media is not the most important thing.
So Karen, what about an idea that if you wouldn't do that activity in the classroom because it would seem silly, why would you do it online when it's easier to lose your audience, right?
I don't know. My friend works at this program. It's a nutrition program, and the teacher insists on doing something that's like, my name starts with a K, so I have a picnic basket with kale in it. It's like, well, you run out of food
Vegetables
pretty quickly, and that is just silly. It's just, maybe it's a reasonable exercise, but you spend a lot of time on it, and people don't know what the point is.
I just add to some of the stuff you said about collaboration there. I've seen Nick Floro do some really great things on his online sessions using Miro. So I've put a link in the chat, and I'll put it in our show notes later on for some of the work he's done using that tool as kind of a whiteboard and idea board space. And I'll let Julie bring us around to wrapping up this amazing chat that could go on for a lot longer.
It really could.
I know. Well, you know, one of the goals that Tracy and I had for doing all these sessions is that we would learn stuff from the conversations too. And I feel like I've learned a lot of good things. I love the idea about kind of moving to a different space for learning activities rather than just staying at your desk. And, you know, there are a couple of others. I know we'll kind of scrape those out. As we sort of wrap up, where can people find you, and what are you working on, and is there any shameless plugs are welcome? Is there anything you'd like to kind of point people towards?
Well, we're working on, you know, we've been talking about how to do this well for 20 years, but I think over the last couple of years, we've learned a lot of things. We're not just teaching newbies anymore. We're teaching people that want to get more advanced skills, either from a design or a facilitation perspective, and sometimes those really merge. So we're trying to investigate what people are doing well and collect those. One of the things, and I think you already pasted it in the chat, in April, we're going to do a session on MS Teams and using these third-party integration tools. And it's a free session. I'd love everybody to come. Let me see if I can find that link again. I already pasted it in the chat once, but you know, things go away. Oh, here it is. I'll paste in the link, kick up the capabilities of your classroom. And Richard, who does this, he's from London. He's got a wonderful accent. He's super engaging, and he really knows MS Teams inside and out. So if you're interested in that, it's a great webinar coming up in April.
That one sounds terrific. I'm doing a couple sessions for training coming up, choosing the right technology for your virtual sessions and tips and techniques. These are like super fast sessions. So it'll be interesting to get in all the things I want to say about 3 different software tools in 50 minutes. So if you want to come and see me juggle, I'm sure it'll be fascinating.
But on Training Mag?
Yeah, I just pasted the link in chat. It's Training Conference 2021.
Okay.
And Julie, have you got anything coming up?
I am always available at usablelearning.com, and the other place I usually point people is I have a really wonderful and group of people in a Facebook group for Design for How People Learn is the name of the Facebook group, and we'll put the link in there. But that has been really delightful, and I think people are more than willing to help with issues or anything that comes up or comments, and people post interesting things, and so that's probably the other place to look. How about you, Tracy?
We've got the Canadian e-learning conference was postponed in 2020. We actually had to sort of just kibosh it, and then we're going virtual in 2021 because of current conditions. So we have our call out for speakers right now. The conference is June 10th and 11th, 2021 or 2021. The call for speakers is open until February 5th, and it is at canadianelearning.ca. So I welcome anyone to submit to that as well.
I'm going to sign up.
Perfect.
Or I'm going to.
I'm also doing a kind of a blended learning session for the e-learning guild online conference, which is deepening your ID skill, your instructional design skills. It's an online conference in February. So I posted the link for that there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. The last one I posted there was a link to Patty Shank's articles. She wrote a series of 5 research-based articles on instructional design for virtual and blended. They're really, really well done. So if you want to take a look at that link with her name next to it, I think it's worth your time to take a look at and share.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, ladies. It has been one heck of an amazing chat today. This has been,
Nice
doing
to
this
see
all
you all.
afternoon.
Yeah,
nice to
thank
see
you so much.
And this virtual stuff is nice, but let's get together soon.
Well,
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
All
See
right.
you
Thank
soon.
you very
All right.
much, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
thank you.